an extraordinary place called Israel. He described the beautiful hills, the verdant fields, the wonderful springs, and the rivers that he planned to create. Then he described how the people who lived there would be smart, resourceful, would create great cities, wonderful art, amazing scientific innovations. Won't the rest of the world be jealous, God, putting so many wonderful things inside Israel, the angels fretted? Don't worry, said God. Wait until the world sees the neighbors I'm giving them. The Midrash, the art of Midrash, among other things, is the ability to listen to the Torah's silences. Sometimes these quiet moments contain profound lessons. What is the meaning of Abraham's silence as he rides for 3 days with Isaac, his beloved son, toward the mountain, the greatest trial of his life? Or of Yitzhak's silence as he lies bound on the altar, watching the knife poised above him and wondering why? Or of Yaakov when he sees that his son Reuben has defiled his bed? These are eloquent silences, implicit with meaning. These are not mere absence of words. They contain a reticence, a concealment, a beckoning to those who hear them to explore, to conjecture, to enter the mind of the characters involved, and to seek understanding. The Torah does not bear all of its deepest thoughts and understandings on the surface, just as a person does not bear all of his or hers. At its deepest level, the Torah is a profound meditation on what it is to be a person created in the Holy One's image. We are to be, more precisely, his image bearers, to borrow Michael Heiser's term. So it is with astonishingly understated narrative of Moshe's request to the Almighty when he asked to appoint a successor. Skipping ahead a wee bit from our Torah portion this week, we read in Numbers 27, 16 to 17. Moshe said to Adonai, "May Adonai, the God of the spirits of all mankind, appoint a man over this community to go out and come in before them, one who will lead them out and bring them in. So Adonai's people will not be like sheep without a shepherd." Pretty straightforward. On the surface, we find no drama, no passion, no inner conflict, nothing particularly noteworthy. Yet I believe the sages were right to detect here a silence that we can pull apart and discover its meaning. The immediate context of this supplication before Hashem was Moshe's knowledge of his own mortality, of the fact that he will not live to cross the Jordan and enter the land. We read back in Devarim 32, "Then Adonai said to Moshe, go up this mountain in the Avarim range and see the land I have given the Israelites. After you have seen it, you too will be gathered to your people, as your brother Aharon was." Miriam had died. So had Aharon. Now Moshe himself was within sight of the Malach HaMavet, the angel of death. Who would be his successor? Had he no thoughts on the matter? Surely he had a notion of who he thought it should be. With profound attentiveness, the sages listened to the previous passage, and there they found a clue. It is the story of the daughters of Zelophehad, who had claimed their rights of inheritance in the land, even though inheritance passed through the male line and their father had left no sons. Moshe brought their request to the Lord, who answered that their request would indeed be granted. Against this background, one can imagine Moshe's thoughts as he brings his own request to Hashem that a successor be appointed. What could have been his reason for making this request right after declaring the order of inheritance previously? He could have reasoned that when the daughters of Zelophehad inherited from their father, that the time was right for him to make his own request. If daughters inherit, it could surely be right that his own sons should inherit his glory. It was the sage's opinion, however, that Moshe's sons sat idly by while Joshua served Moshe faithfully, showed him great honor, and should therefore be his successor. This is the unspoken drama. Not only was Moshe fated not to enter the land, but he was also destined to see his sons overlooked in the search for a successor. That was his second personal tragedy. But it is precisely here that we find for the first time one of the Torah's most powerful propositions. Biblical Israel had its dynasties. Both priesthood and later kingship were handed down from father to son in a patrilineal fashion. Yet there is a profoundly egalitarian thread in Torah from the beginning. What is that thread? Let's follow it back. Ironically, it is given one of its most powerful expressions in the mouth of the rebel Korah and the others who were with him. Let us read number 16, verse 3. They assembled together against Moshe and Aharon and said to them, "You have gone far enough, for all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and Adonai is in their midst. So why do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of Adonai?" But it is not only Korah and company who give voice to such a sentiment. We hear it in the words of Moshe himself when he says in Numbers 11:29, "Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put his spirit on them." We hear it again in the words of Hannah when she gives thanksgiving on the birth of her son. The Lord sends poverty and wealth. He humbles and he exalts. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. He seats them with princes and has them inherit a throne of honor. It is implicit in the great holiness command of Leviticus 11:44. Adonai said to Moshe, "Speak to the entire assembly of Israel and say to them, 'Be holy, because I, the Lord your God, am holy.'" These words are echoed by Kepha in 1 Peter 1:16 when he says, "But like the Holy One who called you, be holy yourselves also in all your behavior, because it is written, 'You shall be holy, for I am holy.'" This is not a call to priests or prophets, but to an entire people. There is found within the pages of Holy Writ a profound egalitarian notion. The concept of a nation of individuals standing with equal dignity and value in the presence of the Lord. Korah was wrong. Less so in what he said than in why he said it. He was a narcissist attempting to seize power, but he tapped into a deep reservoir of popular feeling and religious principle. The people of God have not always been easy to lead because each is called on to be a leader. What Korah forgot is that to be a leader, it is also necessary to be a follower. Leadership presupposes discipleship. This is what Joshua knew and what led to his choice as Moshe's successor. This is what the master meant when he said, "If anyone wants to be first, he shall be last of all and servant of all." The tradition, this whole thing is summed up by the famous Maimonidean ruling. Listen to this carefully. With 3 crowns was Israel crowned, with the crown of Torah, the crown of priesthood, and the crown of kingship. The crown of priesthood was bestowed on Aaron. The crown of kingship was conferred on David, and through him Messiah. But the crown of Torah is for all Israel. Whoever desires it can win it. This had immense social and political consequences. Throughout most of the biblical era, all 3 crowns were in operation. In addition to prophets, Israel had kings and an active priesthood serving in the temple. The dynastic principle, leadership passing from father to son, still dominated 2 of those 3 roles. But with the destruction of the Second Temple, kingship and a functioning priesthood ceased. Leadership passed to the sages who saw themselves as heirs to the prophets. We see this in the famous one-sentence summary of Jewish history with which the tractate Avot, the Ethics of the Fathers, begins. Moshe received the Torah at Sinai and handed it on to Joshua. Joshua handed it on to the elders to the prophets, and the prophets handed it on to the men of the great assembly. This is very interesting. Listen to that list again carefully. What do you not hear? Moshe received the Torah at Sinai and handed it on to Joshua. Joshua handed it on to the elders to the prophets, and the prophets handed it on to the men of the great assembly. Moshe to Joshua, the elders to the prophets, to the great assembly. What is conspicuously missing from this list is the priests. The Kohanim were in biblical Israel the primary guardians and teachers of the Torah. Why did the rabbis not see themselves as heirs to Aaron and the priesthood? That would, on the face of it, have been far more natural than defining themselves as successors to the prophets. There are many reasons, but one is surely this. The priesthood was a dynasty. It was not open to everyone. It was restricted by birth. Prophetic leadership, by contrast, would never be predicated in advance. The proof was Moshe. The very fact that his children did not succeed him as leaders of the people may have been an acute distress to him. But it was a deep consolation to everyone else. It meant that anyone, by discipleship and dedication, could aspire to godly leadership and the crown of Torah. The crown of Torah was and remains open to all. Moshe's tragedy was Israel's consolation. The fact that his successor was not his son, but Joshua, his disciple, meant that one form of leadership could be aspired to by everyone. Dignity is not a privilege of birth. Honor is not confined to those with the right parents. In a world defined and created by Torah, everyone is a potential leader. We can all learn to wear the right to that crown. Let me say a bit more about Korach and his rebellion. This rebellion was the single most dangerous challenge to Moshe's leadership during the 40 years that he led people through the wilderness. The precise outline of the events, you probably noticed, is difficult to follow. Probably because the events themselves were tumultuous and disorderly. The narrative makes it clear, however, that the rebels came from different groups, each of whom had different reasons for their resentment. Could it be that Korah, the prime instigator of this uprising, was aggrieved that Moshe had appointed Aaron as high priest? Moshe was the child of Amram, Kohath's eldest son. Korah was the firstborn of Kohath's second son, Yizchar, and felt that he should have been made high priest. The fact that Moshe had appointed his own brother to that role could have struck Korah as unacceptable favoritism. The Reubenites, suggests Ibn Ezra, felt that as descendants of Yaakov's firstborn, they were entitled to leadership positions. He adds that the final straw may have been Moshe's appointment of Joshua as his successor, of which I spoke earlier. Joshua came from the tribe of Ephraim, the son of Joseph. This may have revived memories of the old conflict between the children of Leah, of whom Reuben was the firstborn, and those of Rachel, whose first child was Joseph. The 250 other rebels, even Ezra conjectures, were firstborns, still unreconciled to the fact that after the sin of the golden calf, the role of special service to God passed from the firstborn to the tribe of Levi. Each faction had grounds for feeling that they had been passed over in the allocation of leadership positions. The irony of their challenge is unmistakable. Remember that they're posing here as egalitarians. All the community are holy, all of them. Why then do you raise yourself above the Lord's congregation? So what they're saying here is that everyone should be a leader. What they mean is, I should be a leader. As for the timing of the revolt, it most likely occurred during the period immediately following that debacle of the spies, and the ensuing decree that the people would not enter the land until the next generation. If the Israelites, despite their complaints, felt that they were moving toward their destination, Then Korach and the other malcontents had no realistic chance of rousing the people to revolt. Once the people realized, however, that they would not live to cross the Jordan, Korach knew that rebellion was possible. The people were disillusioned, and they had nothing to lose. Thus far, the story of Korach is intensely realistic. A leader is able to mobilize a people by articulating a vision. But the journey from the real to the ideal, from starting point to destination, is fraught with setbacks and disappointments. That is when leaders are in danger of being deposed or assassinated. Korach is the eternal symbol of a perennial type, the coldly calculating man of ambition who foments discontent against a leader, accusing him of being a self-seeking tyrant. He opposes him in the name of freedom, but what he really wants is to become a tyrant himself. What is exceptionally unusual is how the story ends. Moshe had initially proposed a simple test. The rebels and Aaron were to prepare incense the next day. God would then signal those offering who he chose. Before this could happen, however, Moshe found himself unbearably provoked by the contemptuous attitude of Datan and Abiram. Sensing that the situation might be getting out of control, he sought an immediate and dramatic resolution, as we read here. Moshe said, "By this you shall know that it was the Lord who sent me to do all these things, for they are not of my own devising. If these men die, as all men do, if their lot be the common fate of all mankind, it was not the Lord who sent me. But if the Lord brings about something unheard of, so that the ground opens its mouth and swallows them all up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into Sheol, you shall know that these men have spurned the Lord." That was Numbers 16, 28-30. No sooner had he finished speaking, than the ground opened and swallowed the rebels. The miracle Moshe had encountered had happened. But any narrative convention, we would expect that this would be the end of the rebellion and would vindicate Moshe. Heaven had answered his call in the most dramatic of ways. He had been proved right. End of revolt, end of story, right? This is precisely what does not happen. A powerful example of what makes the Torah so challenging, its message so unexpected. Instead of quelling the revolt, we read the following. The next day, the whole Israelites community grumbled against Moshe and Aaron. "You have killed the Lord's people," they said. This time, it is the Almighty himself who intervenes. He tells Moshe to take 12 staffs, one for each tribe, and deposit them overnight in the tent of meeting. The next morning, the staff bearing the name of Aaron and the tribe of Levi had sprouted, budded, blossomed, and borne almonds. Only then did the rebellion end. This is an astonishing denouement. What it tells us is profound. The use of force does not always end a conflict. Quite often it merely adds grievance to injury. Even the miracle of the ground opening and swallowing his opponents did not secure for Moses the vindication that he sought. What ended the conflict was something else altogether. The visible symbol that Aaron was the chosen vehicle of the God of life. The gentle miracle of the dead wood that came to life again, flowering and bearing fruit, anticipates the famous words of the book of Proverbs about the Torah. We say it every week. It is a tree of life to those who grasp it, and all who uphold it are to be praised. Proverbs 3:4. Moshe and Aharon stood accused of failing in their mission. They had brought the people out of Egypt to bring them to the land of Israel. After the debacle of the spies, that hope had died. The stick that came to life again, much like Ezekiel's vision of the valley of dry bones, symbolized that hope was not dead, merely deferred. The next generation would live and reach their destination. God is the God of life, and what he touches never withers away. That's all my thoughts on this Torah portion. What are your thoughts? to mind as you read through it? Questions you might